There is in all things a pattern that is part of our universe. It is symmetry, elegance, and grace. Those qualities you find always in that which the true artist captures. You can find it in the turning of the seasons, in the way sand trails along a ridge, in the branch clusters of the creosote bush, or the pattern of its leaves. We try to copy these patterns in our lives and our society, seeking the rhythms, the dances, the forms that comfort. Yet, it is possible to see peril in the finding of ultimate perfection. It is clear that the ultimate pattern contains its own fixity. In such perfection, all things move towards death. From Collected Sayings of Muad D'ib by the Princess of Rohan. Muad D'ib remembered that there had been a meal heavy with spice essence. He clung to this memory because it was an anchor point, and he could tell himself from this vantage that his immediate experience must be a dream. I am a theater of processes, he told himself. I am prey to the imperfect vision, to the race consciousness and its terrible purpose. Yet he could not escape the fear he had somehow overrun himself, lost his position in time, so that past and future and present mingled without distinction. It was a kind of visual fatigue, and it came, he knew, the constant necessity of holding the prescient future as a kind of memory that was in itself a thing intrinsically of the past. Shiny prepared the meal for me, he told himself. Yet Chani was deep in the south, in the cold country where the sun was hot, secreted in one of the new siege strongholds, safe with their son Leto II. Or was that thing yet to happen? No, he reassured himself. For Alia, the strange one, his sister, had gone there with his mother and with Chani. A 20-thumper trip into the south, riding a Reverend Mother's palanquin fixed to the back of a wild maker. He shied away from the thoughts of riding the giant worms, asking himself, or is Alia yet to be born? I was on Razia, Paul recalled. We went raiding to recover the water of our dead in Arrakis. And I found the remains of my father in a funeral pyre. I enshrined the skull of my father in a Fremen rock mound overlooking Hard Pass. Or was that a thing yet to be? My wounds are real, Paul told himself. My scars are real. The shrine of my father's skull is real. Still in the dreamlike state, Paul remembered that Hara, Jamis' wife, had intruded on him once to say there had been a fight in the sieged corridor. That had been the interim siege before the women and children had been sent into the deep south, Harad stood there in the entrance to the inner chamber, the black wings of her hair tied back by wire rings on a chain. She had held aside the chamber's hangings and told him that Shani had just killed someone. This happened, and Paul told himself. This was real, not born out of its time and subject to change. Paul remembered he had rushed out to find Shani standing beneath the yellow glow globes of the corridor, clad in a brilliant blue wraparound robe with hood thrown back, a flush of exertion on her elfin features. She had been sheathing her crysknife. A huddled group had been hurrying away down the corridor with a burden, and Paul remembered telling himself, "You always know when they're carrying a body." Shini's wire rings, worn openly in siege on a cord around her neck, tinkled as she turned toward him. "Shani, what is this? I dispatched one who came to challenge you in single combat, Usul. You killed him?" "Yes. Perhaps I should have left him for Hara." And Paul recalled the faces of the people around them had showed appreciation for these words. Even Hara had laughed. "But he came to challenge me." "You trained me yourself in the wording way, Usul." "Certainly, but you shouldn't. I was born in the desert, Usul. I know how to use a crysknife." He suppressed his anger, tried to talk reasonably. "This may be all true, Shani, but I am no longer a child hunting scorpions in the siege by the light of the hand globe, Usul. I do not play games." Paul glared at her, caught by the odd ferocity beneath her casual attitude. "He was not worthy, Usul," Shani said. "I'd not disturb your meditation with the likes of him." She moved closer, looking at him out of the corners of her eyes, dropping her voice so that only he might hear. "And beloved, when it's learned that the challenger may face me and be brought to shameful death by Muad D'ib's woman, there will be fewer challengers." Yes, Paul told himself. That had certainly happened. It was true past. And the number of challengers testing the new blade of Muad D'ib did drop dramatically. Somewhere in a world not of a dream, there was a hint of motion. The cry of a night bird. "I dream," Paul reassured himself. "It's the spice meal." Still, there was about him a feeling of abandonment. He wondered if it might be possible that his rough spirit had slipped over somehow into the world where the Fremen believed he had his true essence. Into the Alam Amithal, the world of similitudes, that metaphysical realm where all physical limitations were removed. And he knew fear at the thought of such a place, because removal of all limitations meant removal of all points of reference. In the landscape of a myth, he could not orient himself and say, I am because I am here. His mother had said once, the people are divided, some of them in how they think of you. I must be waking from the dream, Paul thought to himself. For this had happened. These words from his mother, the Lady Jessica, who was Reverend Mother of the Fremen. These words had passed through reality. Jessica was fearful of the religious relationship between himself and the Fremen. Paul knew. She didn't like the fact that people of both Siege and Graben referred to Muad D'ib as him. And she went questioning among the tribes, sending out her Sayadina spies, collecting their answers and brooding on them. She had quoted a Bene Gesserit proverb to him. When religion and politics travel in the same cart, the writers believe nothing can stand in their way. Their movement becomes headlong, faster and faster and faster. They put aside all thought of obstacles and forget that a precipice does not show itself to the man in a blind rush until it's too late. Paul recalled that he had sat there in his mother's quarters, in the inner chamber shrouded by dark hangings, with their surfaces covered by woven patterns of Fremen mythology. He had sat there, hearing her out, knowing the way she was always observing, even when her eyes were lowered. Her oval face had new lines in it at the corners of the mouth, but the hair was still like polished bronze. The wide green eyes, though, hid beneath their overcasting of spice-imbued blue. The Fremen have a simple, practical religion, he said. Nothing about religion is simple, she warned. But Paul, seeing the clouded figure that still hung over them, the clouded future that still hung over them, found himself swayed by anger. He could only say, religion unifies our forces. It's our mystique. You deliberately cultivate this air, this bravura, she charged. You never cease indoctrinating. Thus you yourself taught me, he said. But she had been full of contentions and arguments that day. It had been the day of the circumcision ceremony for little Leto. Paul had understood some of the reasons for her upset. She had never accepted as liaison the marriage of youth with Chani. But Chani had produced an Atreides son, and Jessica found herself unable to reject the child with the mother. Jessica had stirred finally under his stare, said, "You think me a natural mother?" "Of course not. I see the way you watch me when I'm with your sister. You don't understand about your sister." "I know why Alia is different," he said. She was unborn. part of you when you change the water of life sheet. You know nothing of it. And Paul, suddenly unable to express the knowledge gained out of its time, said only, "I don't think you unnatural." She saw his distress, said, "There is a thing, son. Yes? I do love your Chani. I accept her." This was real, Paul told himself. This wasn't the imperfect vision to be charged by the twistings out of time and out of time's own birth. The reassurance gave him a new hold on his world. Bits of solid reality began to dip through the dream state into his awareness. He knew suddenly that he was in a herrig, a desert camp. Chani had planted their still tint on flower sand for its softness. That could only mean Chani was nearby. Chani, his soul. Chani, his saya. Sweet as the desert spring. Chani, up from the memories of the deep south. Now he remembered her singing a sand shanty to him in the time for sleep. "Ooh, my soul, have no taste for paradise this night, and I swear by Shai-Hulud, you will go there obedient to my law." And she had sung the walking song lovers shared on the sand. Its rhythm, like the drag of dunes against the feet. "Tell me of thine eyes, and I will know thee of thy heart. Tell me of thy feet, and I will tell thee of thy hands. Tell me of thy sleeping, and I will tell thee of thy waking. Tell me of thy desires, and I will tell thee of thy need." He had heard someone strumming a baliset in another tent, and he thought then of Gurney Halleck, reminded by the familiar instrument. He had thought of Gurney, whose face he had seen in a smuggler band, but who had not seen him, could not see him or know him, lest they inadvertently led the Arrakis to the son of the Duke they had killed. But the style of the player in the night, the distinctiveness of the fingers, on the baliset strings, brought the real musician back to Paul's memory. It had been shot at the leper, captain of the Fedayeen, leader of the death commandos who guarded Muad D'ib. "We are in the desert," Paul remembered. "We are in the central erg beyond the Harkon patrols. I am here to walk the sand, to lure a maker and mount him on my own cunning, that I may be Fremen entire." He felt now the mallet pistol at his belt, the crysknife. He felt the silence surrounding him. It was that special pre-morning silence when the night birds had gone and the day creatures had not yet signaled their alertness to their enemy, the sun. You must ride the sand in the light of day, that Shai-Hulud shall see and know you have no fear, Stilgar had said. Thus we turn our time around and set ourselves to sleep this night. Quietly, Paul sat up, feeling the looseness of a slack stillsuit around his body, the shadowed still tent beyond. So softly he moved, yet Shiny heard him. She spoke from the tent's gloom, another shadow there. It's not yet full light, beloved. Saya, he said, speaking with half a laugh in his voice. You call me your desert spring, she said, but this day I'm thy gold and thy goad. I am the Sayadina who watches that the rites be obeyed. He began tightening his stillsuit. You told me once the words of the Intab bar, he said. You told me, woman is thy field, go then to thy field and till it. I am the mother of thy firstborn, she agreed. He saw her in the grayness matching him movement for movement, securing her stillsuit for the open desert. You should get all the rest you can, she said. He recognized her love for him, speaking then, and chided her gently. The Sayadina of the Watch does not caution or warn the candidate. She slid across to his side, touched his cheek with her palm. Today I am both the watcher and the woman. You should have left this duty to another, he said. Waiting is bad enough at best, she said. I'd sooner be at thy side. She kissed her palm before securing the face flap of his suit. Then turned and cracked the seal of the tent. The air that came in to them held the chill, not quite dryness, that would precipitate trace dew in the dawn. With it came the smell of a pre-spiced mass. A mass they had detected off to the northeast. And that told them there would be a maker nearby. Paul crawled through the sphincter opening, stood on the stand, and stretched the sleep from his muscles. A faint green pearl luminescence etched the eastern horizon. The tents of his troop were small false dunes around him in the gloom. He saw a movement off to the left, the guard, and knew they had seen him. They knew the peril he faced this day. Each Fremen had faced it. They gave him this last few moments of isolation. Now he might prepare himself. It must be done today, he told himself. He thought of the power he wielded in the face of the Ogrim, the old men who sent their sons to him to be trained in the wielding way of battle, the old men who listened to him now in council and followed his plans, the men who returned to pay him that highest Fremen compliment. Your plan worked, Muad D'ib. Yet the meanest and smallest of the Fremen warriors could do a thing that he had never done. And Paul knew his leadership suffered from the omnipresent knowledge of this difference between them. He had not ridden the Maker. Well, he had gone up with the others for training trips and raids, but he had not made his own voyage. Until he did, his world was bounded by the abilities of others. No true Fremen could permit this. Until he did this thing himself, even the greatest Southlands, the area some 20 thumpers beyond the Erg, were denied him unless he ordered a palanquin and rode like a reverend mother or one of the sick and wounded. Memory returned to him of his wrestling with his inner awareness during the night. He saw a strange parallel here. If he mastered the Maker, his rule was strengthened. If he mastered the inward eye, this carried its own measure of command. But beyond them both lay the quiet area, the great unrest where all the universe seemed embroiled. The differences in the ways he comprehended the universe haunted him. Accuracy matched with inaccuracy. He saw it in situ. Yet, when it was born, when it came to the pressures of reality, the now had its own life and grew with its own subtle differences. Terrible purpose remained. Race consciousness remained. And overall loomed the jihad, bloody and wild. Shani joined him outside the tent, hugging her elbows, looking up at him from the corners of her eye, the way she did when she studied his mood. Tell me again about the wars of thy homeworld, old Usul, she said. He saw that she was trying to distract him, ease his mind of tensions before the deadly test. It was growing tighter. It was growing lighter. And he noted that some of his Aedakeen were already striking their tents. I'd rather you told me about the secret ancient about our son, he said. Does our Leto yet hold my mother in his palm? It's Alia he holds as well, she said, and he grows rapidly. He'll be a big man. What's it like in the south? He asked. When you ride the Maker, you will see for yourself, she said. But I wish to see it first through your eyes. It's powerfully lonely, she said. He touched the the Nizoni scarf on her forehead, where it protruded from her stillsuit cap. Why do we not talk about the siege? I have talked about it. The siege is a lonely place without our men. It's a place of work. We labor in the factories and the pine rooms. There are weapons to be made, poles to plant, that we may forecast the weather, spice to collect for the bribes. There are dunes to be planted to make them grow and anchor them. There are fabrics and rugs to make, fuel cells to charge. There are children to train, that the triumph's strength may never be lost. Is nothing then pleasant in the siege? He asked. The children are pleasant. We observe the rites. We have sufficient food. Sometimes one of us may come north to be with our man. Life must go on. My sister Alia, is she accepted yet by the people? Shani turned toward him in the growing dawnlight. Her eyes bored into him. It's a thing to be discussed another time, beloved. Let us discuss it now. You should conserve your energies for the test, she said. He saw that he had touched something sensitive, hearing the withdrawal in her voice. The unknown brings his own worries, he said. Presently she nodded, said, There is yet misunderstanding because of Alia's strangeness. The women are fearful because a child, little more when an infant, talks of things that only an adult should know. They do not understand the change in the womb that made Alia different. There's trouble? He asked, and he thought, I've seen visions of trouble over Alia. Chani looked toward the glowing line of the sunrise. Some of the women had banded to appeal to the Reverend Mother. They demanded she exorcise the demon in her daughter. They quoted the scripture, Suffer not a witch to live among us. And what did my mother say to them? She recited the law and sent the women away abashed. She said, If Alia incites trouble, it is the fault of authority for not foreseeing and preventing the trouble. And she tried to explain how the charge had worked on Alia in the womb. But the women were angry because they had been embarrassed. They were sent away muttering. There will be trouble because of Alia, he thought. A crystal blowing of sand touched the exposed portions of his face. Bringing the scent of the pre-spiced mass. I'll say all the rain of sand that brings the morning, he said. He looked out across the gray light of the desert landscape. The landscape beyond pity, the sand that was formed, absorbed in itself. Dry lightning streaked a dark corner to the south, sign the storm had built up its static charge there. the roll of thunder boomed long after. The voice that beautifies the land, Chani said. More of his men were stirring out of their tents. Guards were coming in from the rims. Everything around him moved smoothly in the ancient routine that required no orders. Give as few orders as possible, his father had told him once long ago. Once you've given the orders on a subject, you must always give orders on that subject. The Fremen knew this rule instinctively. The troop's wiremaster began the morning chanty. Adding it to now the call for the right to initiate a sandrider. The world is a carcass, the man chanted, his voice wailing across the dunes. Who can turn away the angel of death? What Shai Hulud has decreed must be. Paul listened, recognizing that these were the words that also began the death chant of his fated kin. The words the death commandos recited as they hurled themselves into battle. Will there be a rock shrine here this day to mark the passing of another soul? Paul asked himself. Will Fremen stop here in the future, each to add another stone, and think on Muad D'ib who died in this place? He knew this was among the alternatives today, but a fact along the lines of the future radiating from this position in time-space, the imperfect vision plagued him. The more he resisted his terrible purpose and fought against the coming of the jihad, the greater the turmoil that wove through his prescience. His entire future was becoming like a river hurtling through the chasm, the violent nexus beyond which all was fog and clouds. Stilgar approaches, Chani said. I must stand apart now, beloved. Now I must be Sayadina and observe the rite that may be reported truly to the chronicles. She looked up at him, and for a moment her reserve slipped. Then she had herself under control. When this is past, I shall prepare thy breakfast with my own hands, she said. She turned away. Stilgar moved toward him across the floor sand and stirring up little dust puddles. The dark niches of his eyes remained steady on Paul with their untamed stare. The glimpse of black beard above the stillsuit mask. The lines of craggy cheeks could have been wind etched from the native rock for all their movement. The man carried Paul's banner on its staff. The green and black banner with a water tube in the staff. The array was a legend in the land. Half pridefully, Paul thought, I cannot do this, the simplest thing, without becoming a legend. They will mark how I parted from Chani, how I greet Stilgar, every move I make this day, live or die, it is a legend. I must not die. Then it will only be legend and nothing to stop the jihad. Stilgar planted the staff in the sand beside Paul, dropped his hands to his sides. The blue within blue eyes remained level and intent. And Paul thought how his own eyes already were assuming this mask of color from the spice. They united us the Haji, Stilgar said with ritual solemnity. As I taught him, Paul responded, "Who can deny a Fremen the right to walk or ride where he wills? I am a D'ib," Stilgar said, "never to be taken alive. I am a leg of the death tripod that will destroy our foes." Silence settled over them. Paul glanced at the other Fremen scattered over the sand beyond Stilgar, the way they stood without moving for this moment of personal prayer. And he thought of how the Fremens were a people whose living consisted of killing, an entire people who had lived with rage and grief all of their days, never once considering what might take the place of either, except for a dream with which late Kynes had infused them before his death. Where is the Lord who led us through the land of deserts and pits? Stilgar asked. He is ever with us, the Fremen chanted. Stilgar squared his shoulders, slipped closer to Paul, and lowered his voice. Now remember what I told you. Do it simply and directly. Nothing fancy. Among our people, we ride the Maker at the age of 12. You are more than 6 years beyond that age, and not born to this life. You don't have to impress anyone with your courage. We know you are brave. All you must do is call the Maker and write him. I will remember, Paul said. See what you do. I'll not have you shame my teaching. Stilgar pulled a plastic rod about a meter long from beneath his robe. The thing was pointed at one end, had a spring on clapper at the other end. I prepared the thumper myself. It's a good one. Take it. Paul felt the warm smoothness of the plastic as he accepted the thumper. She chocolate has your hooks, Stilgar said. He'll hand them to you as you step out onto that dune over there. He pointed to his right. Call a big Maker, Usul. Show us the way. Paul marked the tone of Stilgar's voice, half ritual and half that of a worried friend. In that instant, the sun seemed above the horizon. The sky took on a silver green blue that warned this would be a day of extreme heat and dryness even for Arrakis. It is the time of the scalding day, Stilgar said, and now his voice was entirely ritual. Go, Usul. and ride the Maker. Travel to the sand as leader of men. Paul saluted his banner, knowing how the green and black flag hung limply now that the dawn wind had died. He turned toward the Dune Stilgar and indicated a dirty tan slope with an S-track crest. Already, most of the troop was moving out in the opposite direction, climbing the other dune that had sheltered their camp. One robed figure remained in Paul's path. Shishaki, a squad leader of the Fayakeen. Only his slope-lit eye is visible between stillsuit cap and mask. Shishaki presented two thin whip-like shafts as Paul approached. The shafts were about 1.5 meters long, with glistening plasteel hooks at one end, roughened at the other end for a firm grip. Paul accepted them both in his left hand as required by the ritual. "They are my own hooks," Shishaki, he said in a husky voice. "They never failed." Paul nodded, maintaining the necessary silence. Moved past the man and up the dune slope. At the crest, he glared back. He glanced back, saw the troop scattering like a flight of insects, their robes fluttering as he stood alone now on the sandy ridge with only horizon in front of him. The flat and unmoving horizon. This was a good dune Stilgar had chosen. Higher than his companions for the viewpoint vantage. Stooping, Paul planted the thumper deep into the windward face, where the sand was compacted and would give maximum transmission to the drumming. Then he hesitated, reviewing the lessons, reviewing the life and death necessities that faced him. When he threw the lash, the thumper would begin its summons. Across the sand, a giant worm, a maker, would hear and come to the drumming. With the whip-like hook staffs, all knew he could mount the Maker's high curving back for as long as a forward edge of a worm's ring segment was held open by a hook, open to admit abrasive sand into the more sensitive interior. The creature would not retreat beneath the desert. It would, in fact, roll its gigantic body to bring the open segment as far away from the desert surface as possible. "I am a sand rider," Paul told himself. He glanced down at the hooks in his left hand, thinking that he had only to shift those hooks down the curve of a Maker's immense side to make the creature roll and turn, guiding it where he willed. He had seen it done. He had been humped up the side of a worm for a short ride in training. The captive worm could be ridden until it lay exhausted and quiescent upon the desert surface, and a new maker must be summoned. Once he was past this test, all knew he was qualified to make a 20-thumper journey into the Southland to rest and restore himself, into the South where the women and the families had been hidden from the pogrom among the new armories and siege warrens. He lifted his head and looked to the south, reminding himself that the Maker summoned wild from the Erg was an unknown quantity, and the one who summoned it was equally unknown to the test. In this test, you must gauge the approaching Maker carefully, Stilgar explained. You must stand close enough that you can mount it as it passes, yet not so close that it engulfs you. With abrupt decision, Paul reached and released the thumper's latch. The clapper began revolving, and the summons drummed through the sand. A measured lump, lump, lump. He straightened, scanning the horizon, remembering Stilgar's words. Judge the line of approach carefully. Remember, a worm seldom makes an unseen approach to a thumper. Listen all the same. You may often hear it before you see it. And Chani's words of caution, whispered at night when her fear for him overcame her, filled his mind. When you take your stand along the Maker's path, you must remain utterly still. You must sink like a patch of sand, hide beneath your cloak, and become a little dune in your very existence. Slowly, he scanned the horizon, listening, watching for the signs he had been taught. It came from the southeast, a distant hissing, a sand whisper. Presently he saw the faraway outline of the creature's track against the dawnlight, and realized he had never before seen a Maker this large. Never heard of one this size. It appeared to be more than half a league long, and the rise of the sand wave and its cresting head was like the approach of a mountain. This is nothing I have seen by vision or in life, Paul cautioned himself. He hurried across the path of the thing to take its stand. Caught up entirely by the rushing needs of this moment.